In the midst of social distancing and business lockdowns, a freelance writer and a graphic artist bought a bus, converted it into a tiny home on wheels, and moved out of our 4-bedroom house. 1 year later, we downsized to a Chevy Express. Now we travel between Texas and Pennsylvania from April through November while exploring small towns with rich histories. In the winter, we hunker down in Texas in our schoolie and dream of our next big trip.
We're Alan and Teresa.
And we're rolling with our gnomies.
So this is a map of Vicksburg, Mississippi. We're about to take the walking tour. You can go along with us as we start at the Trailhead, which is 1 block over from where we are now. And we will walk along the canal. We'll shoot some video of some murals that are painted here in town, some historic buildings and historic locations here in Vicksburg's historic district, and we'll just see what they have to offer. Look forward to taking you along. That's the Yazoo and Mississippi Valley Railroad Station. It is now a museum, but isn't that a beautiful building? And you can see the train track over there. The murals are over there. We'll get a little closer look at them here in a little bit. You can see the canal behind the railroad station over there. So this is a beautiful view of the railroad station from up on top of the hill. So we are here at the marker for Highway 61, or 61 Highway as it's often referred to. One of the most prominent U.S. highways that stretch from north to south, from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico.
Right from New York.
And it runs through Vicksburg here, Washington Street, and it was built, I guess, around the 1920s, 30s, when the National Highway System was built, and it was also right around the time that the blues and jazz started to become very popular music genres, and so there's a lot of history here. If you are a blues and jazz fan, you might be familiar with Highway 61. We are looking at the home of Joseph Bazinski, who was a prominent Jewish businessman in the 1840s. And looks like he built this house. What I think is really cool is if you look right up in there, you can see a little statue. It's a big statue of a woman there, just to the right of the front door, right at the top of those stairs. I think that's pretty cool. But this is the home of Joseph Bazinski. He operated a farm and raised horses on land about 3 miles south of here. And he had a livery stable.
Livery stable.
Livery stable. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
And a dry goods store. So he was a prominent businessman. 1857, he purchased this lot, and the construction of the home was completed shortly after the Civil War. So we don't know the exact date.
He raised 14 children.
14 children. And his descendants lived in this house until the early 21st century.
A little known fact, Vicksburg in 1841 became home to the first established Jewish congregation in Mississippi. And I would tell you the Jewish name, or the Hebrew name, but I'm just not going to do that. It translates into men of kindness.
Anshi Chesed.
Yeah, I bet you butchered it too.
Probably the first part of that. I think the second part is Chesed.
But many of the early Jewish immigrants came from what is now part of the modern Germany. Jewish families were welcomed into the community. The Jewish community in Vicksburg initially lived quite modestly as peddlers and small merchants, but after the Civil War grew very prosperous. By the early 20th century, most of the businesses in Vicksburg were Jewish-owned.
We are standing on the back side of the old Courthouse Museum. It's right across the street from the Bazinski home. You can see the iron gate here and the long, tall steel steps up to the back of the building. This is really beautiful. It looks like a great place for a haunted picture show to take place. I can't wait to see the front side of it, though. You can't see the spire on top there.
I'm sure that our
the bell tower.
Up there.
I'm sure that's what that is for the trees, but we're going to go around to the other side and get a look. So we're looking at the house that we think belonged to Sergeant Smith Prentice, who died at age 41, but was one of the most prominent and wealthiest men in the state of Mississippi during the, prior to the Civil War, because he died in 1850. But he was, the interesting thing about Prentice is he was complimented by Daniel Webster, who was well known as one of the best orators of his time. And Webster said that he had never heard a speaker as powerful as Prentice. So that sounds...
that was his office. It wasn't actually his
home.
It
was office. He built this as his office, and he...
and it was built before 1837.
Built before 1837, and so there's a man who was prominent for his time. You can tell a lot about a community by how many fountains it has and how it operates in the beautification department. Water, the elixir of life. So the interesting thing about this building is this is the very first bank in Vicksburg. Little trivia, in 1818, foot-specific shoes were invented, but straight shoes continued to be the most commonly sold up through 1850. But in 1884, Phil Gilbert's shoe parlor, located here in Vicksburg, was the very first merchant to put shoes together in pairs and sell them in boxes. So thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Planters Hall is what it's called, built in 1834. And that's what it looks like. Doesn't hardly look like a bank.
I got a story about this house. Don't turn it off. I got a story about this house.
She got a story about this house.
Seems that in 1854, William McCrae was a sheriff here in town, and he bought this house for his family to live in. And he was, during the Civil War, he was standing in one of those upper windows watching the battle between the Union ships and the Southern soldiers. And one of the shells that they fired, a piece of shrapnel broke off and flew into the window, went right through his beard and into the wall next to him.
And got stuck. I wonder why it didn't get stuck in his beard.
I don't know. I don't know why. How wide was his beard that it went into the wall and not into his throat?
He must not have had a very thick beard.
He must have had a real wide one.
So we're looking at the McNutt House. It was owned by Alexander McNutt, who was elected the 12th governor of Mississippi and served until 1842. So he served 2 terms and then moved back to Vicksburg to continue his law practice. He constructed this house.
He didn't construct it.
In 1826. Well, it was constructed in 1826, not by him. He bought it in 1829 for $900. And it's withstood a lot of things over the years, including the Civil War and many storms. Interesting thing about old McNutt is they called him the Turkey Runner because he wrote short stories about a couple of backwoods dudes who worked for a wealthy cotton planter named the Captain, and his stories were quite humorous.
And they were signed the Turkey Runner.
Yeah, they were signed by the Turkey Runner, so they found out it was actually old McNutt. And what would you expect from a guy named McNutt?
I mean,
The old turkey runner.
hey, dude, turn around.
And right here, ta-da, ta-da, this is the Bel Ami Church here in Vicksburg.
It was founded in 1864 when it was purchased from the First Presbyterian congregation. The original building, built in 1828, was replaced by the current Romanesque Revival structure in 1912. The church became known as the Mother Congregation of African Methodism in the state of Mississippi. Campbell College was built next to the church and became the first African American college in Mississippi established without the help of whites. In 1897, the college was moved to Jackson and was absorbed into Jackson State University.
I love that
There's one on
window
each
up there.
side.
There's one, yeah, the stained glass window. There's another one just like it on the back side, so they mirror each other. I would imagine that the sunlight
are all different.
Yeah, the lower windows are different, but those two flowered design
there's actually 4 of them.
windows.
I know there's 3. I haven't looked over here.
I would imagine that the sunlight going through those, there's one over here on the side too, so there's one on the back, one on the side, one on the front. I bet they produce some really magical effects on the inside there when the sunlight shines through. So this home is called Anchuca. It's an Indian name that means happy home. And interesting thing about this home is in 1868, Jefferson Davis, who was the Confederate president of the Confederacy during the Civil War, was pardoned by President Johnson and released from prison, along with everyone that was in prison held by the Unions, held by the United States for their involvement in the Confederacy. They were all pardoned by President Johnson in 1868. But this home was occupied at that time by Jefferson Davis's brother. And so the legend has it that Davis came here, and all his friends and family and people gathered here to greet him when he came out of prison, and he gave a speech from that balcony up there. So that's an interesting tidbit from history. The home is called Anchuca, means happy home in Indian. I believe Choctaw, if I recall correctly.
Alright, if I don't do this right, then I'm going to be on the bad side of my wife. So y'all bear with me and pray for me. But while you're doing that, don't forget, share us with your friends. Like us if you like us if you don't. Subscribe to the channel. It helps us out. God bless.